Hello and welcome to the Red Special Guitar Podcast. If you've listened before, then thank you so much for coming back. And if this is your first time, then welcome to the channel. What do we talk about? Well, we talk about how Brian May's legendary Red Special Guitar has inspired generations to go on and do things. And for those of you that don't know, Brian made his own guitar with his father back in the early 60s and has gone on to use it for nearly 60 years throughout his whole career with Queen, which is absolutely fantastic. And if you want to learn more about that, then this is the place to be. But also make sure that you check out our most recent episode before this one, episode number 20, which was with Brian May himself. It's a great episode and it's such a culmination of work, time, and you guys trusting in the podcast to be able to get that out there and to get Brian to agree to doing it. And I hope you all enjoyed it. I mean, I really have enjoyed it. It was an absolutely fantastic day for me and one I won't forget. And then everything else that's come off the back of it, Brian being so wonderful on Instagram, and then you guys being absolutely amazing and signing up to Patreon. Is like 30 patrons now, which is just crazy. Keeping up to date with all of you is becoming interesting, but we're figuring that out as we go along. And if that's something you fancy joining, then please check the link in the description below where you can sign up for Patreon and support the channel. But also just the outpouring of messages and comments and emails and private messages from you all saying how much you enjoyed the episode and that you're so pleased that we managed to get Brian, and how relaxed he was and how much you got from the interview. It was felt much more like a chat, which is what the podcast is about. Not so much an interview, but just two people talking about guitars and life. And that's really what the podcast is all about. The whole idea is that it's the chat after the UK or US or worldwide Red Special Guitar meetup in the bar afterwards, where you're with your friends and you're talking about, how did you get into all of this? And documenting those things for forever so that we've got them there for the next generation to be able to watch or listen to and really see where this journey has come from Brian making the guitar all the way up to the formation of the Red Special Forum in the early 2000s on the internet, and then onwards to the Facebook forum, the Red Special meetups, and where we are today with the podcast. It's been an absolutely fantastic journey. It's taken some 20 years of my life doing various things and not always been focused on it, but we find ourselves here today in the episode after having spoken to Brian May. And if you told me 20 years ago when I started all this and started getting involved in this and interested in the Red Special that I'd one day get a chance to talk to my hero, I would have bitten your hands off, and I still would, because it was absolutely fantastic, as I've said lots of times before. So what next? And how do we pick a guest to become the one after Brian May? I mean, that's a tall order for most people and not one that everyone would want to be, because it is literally the episode after Brian May. And today we've had a long think about this in Podcast Towers and with the help of the podcast patrons, and also the help of my wonderful editor, Mr. Andrick Hernandez, who is been fantastic at making the podcast more professional. And go and check out his Instagram, links in the description below. We came up with an idea of putting out an episode which was recorded a little while back before the UK Red Special Guitar meetup, with arguably the first known person that I know of, and I think most people know of, to build a replica of Brian May's Red Special Guitar. He's gone on to build loads of replicas of Brian's guitar over the years. He's an absolutely fantastic chap, font of knowledge, and he even got to play with Brian on stage in the Radio Fly gig. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure, again, you've got a nice warm drink or cold drink, depending on your choice. You turn off all your notifications on your phone, you sit back, relax, and join me in welcoming Mr. Julian Hemingway to the Red Special Guitar Podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen of the Red Special Guitar Podcast listeners, today we have an absolute treat and pleasure, because I've managed to get hold of the man who arguably started off in the UK the movement of making your own Red Special. He nearly gave up, but a fortuitous meeting with someone we've spoken to before meant he's continued on, not only built one Red Special replica, but multiple. Julian Hemingway, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you, and thanks for having me. As they say, I'm glad to join the illustrious band that you've had on here already.
I don't. Well, I won't say illustrious, but that might offend a few of them. But no, it's great to get you on.
Well, they've sounded good so far, so yeah.
No, it's thank you for agreeing. So how have you been over the last year and a half?
I've been fine. I've managed to avoid COVID. I've barely had a cold, so that's probably more down to me than COVID's attempts. But yeah, as far as that's concerned, I'm fine, and only my age now starts to creak a bit. But that's what I have to live with that every day. So
yeah. So, Julian, in terms of with COVID, did that give you some more time at home to build any more Red Specials, or what have you been?
Well, I've actually been retired for quite a while, so I don't have a problem with time. It's more inclination. I tend to sort of sail along doing nothing in particular, and I'll suddenly get an idea, or somebody will come on the forum and they'll say, I'm doing one of these. So I thought, yeah, I haven't done one of those yet, so maybe I ought to have a go as well. But yeah, it's that kind of thing, really. It's not a matter of time. It's a matter of getting my bottom in gear sometimes. Yeah. I've been doing it a long time, so I kind of need that impetus now.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing it a lot longer than most of us, I think. So tell me about how you got into Queen and what started all this off for you.
Right. Well, okay, just sort of a little bit of a potted history. In the early 70s, I was into guitar music in general, and it was kind of pop rock, right through from things like Deep Purple, Sabbath, Free, Fleetwood Mac. But then I got into Status Quo, and I did that because I could hear all the parts of the music. So I thought that was quite a good thing for me to start learning guitar again. Now, I'll say again, because when I was about 11 or 12, I had ambitions through hearing the Beatles and the Shadows of playing the guitar, but it never really got anywhere, and various things got in the way. But when I came to being about 20, I thought, I'm going to have a go at the guitar again. So I bought myself a cheap Japanese Les Paul copy. And I sat there, again, I tend to be more engineering than musical, and I started to look at it as an object. So I thought, if I take it all apart and see what it's made of, could I actually make a guitar? Because I got an idea of a guitar I wanted to make, and this was pre-Queen. And bearing in mind, at this time, I was not really aware of Queen any more than I was of Sweet or Bowie or anybody else. I kind of had heard a couple of singles, but I hadn't really settled on them as anything in particular. And it was more the guitar thing that started me off. So I built a guitar that was very similar to this. This is a Rickenbacker 425, and it's quite a close copy. And the first one I made, I actually had to go to a local shop, and it was hanging in the window. And I said to the guy, would you mind if I got a bit of paper and drew around the body of it, because I want to make one? And he was a reasonably friendly guy. He used to run the shop with one man, and he said, "Yeah, come in." And I used to spend hours in there like a kid in a sweet shop, just sitting there watching what was going on and not really doing a lot. Anyway, I built this guitar. It was plywood. It was a bit of shelving, and I got pickups off an acoustic guitar, which shouldn't have been on there, but it made a noise, and it played quite well. So I was quite pleased with that. As far as Queen, well, this was around about 1974, and I'd heard Killer Queen, Now I'm Here. I even remember listening to the old Grey Whistle tests and watching the cartoon accompaniment to Keep Yourself Alive. And I thought, this is an interesting band. And when I saw Queen on Top of the Pops, I liked Freddie's style. I thought they were very, bombastic and really in your face, and I like that about them. I thought, these are something different, and I thought, what, I'm going to maybe make my next guitar a Brian May guitar. Now, the problem with that was that there was very little information about, and I sort of shelved that for a little bit longer. And I remember hearing Bohemian Rhapsody on the radio. I remember my wife and I were in the kitchen one day, late 1975, And I just stood there listening for the whole 6 minutes or so and thinking, this is absolutely fantastic. There's so much going on there. And I said to her, in those days, you got a Christmas present. If you got an album, you were lucky. And it makes me sound really old. But I said, can I have the album for Christmas, the Night at the Opera, as I found out? And she said, yeah, absolutely. And I got suddenly, absolutely massively, like I do with most of my hobbies, massively overnight became a big Queen fan. So whilst I was waiting for the album to turn up, I had a little walk down to the bottom of my road where there was a newsagent, and I found this. And it was a book, believe it or not, A History of Queen, which was written in 1974, as if had been enough to get a history. And the only picture of Brian's guitar was that.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And I thought, well, okay, and there's quite a good picture of the back of the headstock on another shot, but it's tiny. I don't know if you can see that, just about.
Just about, yeah.
Just about. You can see it's got open back machine heads. And I thought, that's a good start. And so I thought, this has definitely got to be my next guitar. And I started drawing it up. And I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to make something I've never even seen? Oh, by the way, there's a couple of other really faded brown newspapers from the time, Melody Maker, I think this one is. I thought, that's quite a good picture. And this one, a colour one, believe it or not.
Wow, look at that.
That showed me what the colour was. And I thought, wow. So this is from 1976, 14th of February, just after Christmas. So, of course, by this time, I was really into the idea. So I thought, what can I do to make it up? And I haven't got like a draftsman's training. I did a little bit of tech drawing at school, like probably most of us did. But I thought, well, I'll go and get some art card from a local shop. And I got a big sheet of black, big sheet of maroon, and I cut out the guitar as though it was a plan. And I had this sort of maroon body, black scratch plate, bits and pieces, black fingerboard, and it looked great. And I remember it was going to be 13 inches across, not 14. It was going to be 24 3/4 scale, mainly because I had this Les Paul still. And I was looking at that thinking, well, all guitars have got to be pretty much like that. And it was going to have 3 single coils on it, which were like these black plastic things that I don't know if you've ever seen a Zenta Telecaster from that era. They used to have these sort of like Strat style pickups on, but they were quite different in their construction. But they looked, I thought, in a kind of reverse way. They were quite fat looking as well. They're more like the Trisonic size. So I thought that's going to be great. It was going to have a standard bridge and an ordinary tailpiece on it because, again, you could barely get a decent tremolo system. And I thought, well, that's beyond me at this time. But then really what happened was that other things got in the way, and I sort of shelved it for a while. And I was really into Queen. I went out and bought all the previous albums. I started going to the concerts. My first concert was at Hyde Park, believe it or not, which was quite a nice starter for me. And I went to all the tours in the subsequent years, which I call the golden years, between sort of 75 to 77, 78. But other things got in the way, and I started building other guitars. And it was always that Brian May one here, but I need to know more about it. That was the main thing. And I kept sort of, every time I was in a local band as well, or a couple of bands, and I sort of built guitars that were more in keeping with what we were playing, which you'd think were very strange now, but I won't go into those. But as I say, I kept every other year or so, I kept bringing another guitar. And I thought, I'm going to have to do this thing. And, oh, by the way, in the bands, we never played a Queen song, even though I quite fancied it. But my bandmates were never very keen on the idea. We played all sorts of stuff like Thin Lizzy and stuff like that. But I think they all thought Queen was a bit too much and too far on from us. And I think probably with my playing at the time, it was more likely that I wouldn't be able to do it justice. Well, basically, in this intervening period, I never lost my interest in Queen. I was really, in fact, I just got so into this collecting all the magazines, the books, the articles, everything I could find on Brian's guitar. And in the end, I was still getting so frustrated because I thought there's got to be more to what I'm seeing. And there were so many, it was more questions than answers, to be honest. So I actually wrote to Brian a couple of times during this sort of 75, 76, 77. And I've actually got those letters still. And I actually wrote and drew little pictures and said, can you tell me what the thickness of the body is? What's this? What's that? And of course, you never want to ask too many questions in one go, because if you did, you'd have a list like that. And he just said, I can't be bothered with that. But he was great. And he wrote back. He actually wrote on my letters, and he actually drew little drawings and put his dimensions in. And it was great. And I thought, right, I'm going to have to do this. So I thought, right, this is going to have to be done. This was about sort of 79-ish. And I'd only met one other person in this period of time who had made one, and he was American. And he actually sort of came and went. He showed me a photograph of the guitar he made. It was quite close. He used, I think, DiMarzio fat strap pickups on it. But then all of a sudden they appeared in the post. He said, I've given up on it. You can have the pickups if you want. And I thought, that's quite nice of you. But as you say, it was just a passing thing for him. And to me, it was the first I'd ever heard anybody even think about doing one of these guitars. So stop me if I get boring, by the way.
You're not boring at all, Julian.
No, okay. Well, basically, how the first one came about, I started to look into what I actually needed. And I thought, I'm never going to get any more information, so I'm going to have to go with what I'd done. And I used a blow-up of a photograph. And it wasn't perfectly square on to the camera. It was more big bout end slightly towards it. So I ended up drawing this guitar up, and it was slightly oversized. It was bigger on the body. It was, I guessed at the scale length being, let's compromise between a Fender and a Les Paul, made it about 25 inches scale. And I thought, okay, I've got it. It's mahogany. It's got veneer on it. I knew that. I knew roughly, all where everything should go from photographs more than anything else. Brian had given me a couple of hints, but I knew there was an oak block in the center, but I didn't know exactly how big it was. And the biggest problem for me was that, it's got to sound right. So I need Burns trisonic pickups. Now, in pre-1980, there was just nothing. The only way you could get a trisonic was to try and find an old Burns guitar, which I did. Now, amazingly, I came across a Burns Sonic model, which is a twin pickup thing, and it's got a body a bit like a peanut shape, very small thing, and it was hanging up there. I think it cost about £40, and it had the two pickups on. And in fact, they were the correct type in terms of the fact they were bar magnet. They weren't the ones with the pots in. Yep. And I thought, this is fantastic, but how do I get a third one? Now, I was reading in one of my guitar mags, which I tended to buy 2 or 3 at the time, and there was a chap called Paul Day. Now, he was this chap who wrote for these magazines, and he was called the Guitar Guru, and he was very knowledgeable on all vintage guitars. And he was compiling a book on the history of Burns guitars in the UK, and he was asking people for anecdotes. And I thought, well, can I be cheeky and sort of think he's the only guy? If he doesn't know where to get a pickup from, nobody will. So I wrote to him and said, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you a fabulous Burns story. But what I want to do is ask you if you've got, or can you tell me where I could get just a single Burns trisonic pickup? Because I got 2, and told him where they'd come from, and I told him what they were for. Well, of course, it was immediate horror, because apparently I started some sort of ball rolling, and apparently most old Burns got ripped apart for Brian May pickups. But anyway, I sort of got mine. He sent me a pickup and said, can you send me the remains of the Burns guitar that you bought? There was a bit of cash involved. I think it was in my favour. So I came out of it quite well. And so I thank him for that. I did check recently to make sure he's still with us, because he's a bit older than me, and he is, apparently. So if you're out there and you ever listen to anything like this, thanks very much for that. But so the story gets a bit foggy here. So what happened to me then was, this is a story on the actual guitar itself. an American guy wrote to me and he told me that he wanted to have a Red Special somehow, and he didn't really know how, but we wrote back and forth for quite a while. And then he contacted me with a bit of exciting news one day. Bearing in mind, this is letters to and from America, pre-internet, pre-anything. Pigeon would have been quicker. And he'd been talking to John Page from Fender. He'd heard about that he was working on Brian, a copy for Brian, and he was going to build this replica, possibly with a Fender badge run, if he'd approved it. I thought, this is amazing, Anyway, this guy was called Dean Tucholsky, and unfortunately, he's also no longer with us. He passed some time ago. But I talked to him, and I said, this is fantastic news. We might be able to get some good information here. And he said, well, the problem is that he's missing a set of trisonics. So, like an idiot, I offered my prize set of trisonics that I've got earmarked for my guitar. I sent him off, but I had this sort of feeling that might open a door for me, So it wasn't without mercenary intent. So to be fair, Brian came back and said, "Thanks very much. These are brilliant. That I'm going to have these on the guitar." And he said, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I don't want anything." I said, "But if we ever pass at any time near each other, I'd quite like to meet you." And he said, "Yeah, no problem. That we'll try and sort something out." So I thought, well, at least that's, even if I've lost my pickups, I might even get to meet my absolute superhero.
Right.
Well, we all know that guitar stalled. It lay unfinished for years in John Page's basement, along with the broken John Birch guitar, and that's another story as well. Sadly, no Fender Brian May guitar ever surfaced, and John Page parted company with Fender, so there was never going to be any follow-on from that. But I do have it on good authority that whilst the John Birch finally made its way back to the UK and currently resides in a Liverpool music museum, the unfinished John Page guitar, which was going to be the prototype for Brian, actually was completed by Everett Wood of RS Customs in America. And to my knowledge, my pickups are on it. And apparently it was hanging, last time I heard about it, it was hanging on a wall in his office. I've never seen it. I've never seen the photograph. He was going to send me some, but it never transpired. But yeah, so that was quite an interesting sort of roundabout story on that one.
It's funny how it starts off with your pickups and then going off into, I mean, I've known about the John Page guitar for a really long time. Since when I think Everett mentioned that he found it, and that's where Everett then based the measurements for the RS Custom guitars from, but never put two and two together to realise that it was your pickups that were sent to John Page.
Well, I didn't know for sure, but I just said it was something that he had a set there, and he half built the guitar, and it was all in a box together, and obviously just handed it over, and it was quite nice to know it was finished, and it's very likely my pickups are on it. I can't guarantee, but he said that to his knowledge they are. So, and then basically onto my first build. It got to a point around about 1980 that I realised I had to go with what I'd got. I'd found another Burns wreck in the meantime, which saved me. This time it was 3 of the pot magnet style, but again, they were on about the same quid. I think it cost me about 45 quid to buy this whole guitar. I ended up doing the guitar up, painting it, put some ordinary pickups on it, sold that off to cover my costs, which it did. And I modified my pickups with bar magnets because I knew that was what they were by this time. So again, I'm ready to go. I'd also seen the famous old picture of the tremolo setup, which appeared in a black and white photo in a magazine when it was attached to a plank. So I knew roughly how that would work, although I thought it might have just been a sort of a prototype. Again, I was not really any other way of checking these things. So I didn't copy it exactly. Mine was made from a stainless steel plate, which I bent over to make it look correct from outside. And the arm was bolted through a couple of little flanges that stuck out from the side. But it worked fine. In fact, it's still on the guitar now, this one that I brought to the last meet. So the massive mistake, and I mean massive, ludicrous, stupid, smack myself about, was the fact that all this time I had in my possession Brian's plans, his actual complete set. And I'm talking ever since Dean Cholsky had contacted me. He said, "Oh, by the way, John Page has got these plans." He said, "I think there is plans for his prototype." And he sent me these photocopies of it. And there was this guitar, the one in the most complete form on the paper was this diamond inlaid neck, and this body which showed a funny tremolo and some little switches and lots of little knobs. And I thought, well, this must be what John was going to make. It was going to be not quite a Brian May guitar. And I kind of ignored all the other pictures, all the other drawings of the internal structure of the tremolo system, the neck width, the thick neck. It was all there on these drawings. And I thought, and I just didn't believe it. I honestly thought they were John Page's drawings, and I had them for several years before I realized that I actually had a set of Brian's actual drawings from his notebook. So you can see why I sort of wanted to beat myself up. I went ahead and built this guitar, built it oversized. The scale was too long, the body was too wide. It all looked nicely in proportion because I'd done it all from photographs. So it didn't look odd, but it was bigger than it should have been. So after all that, I thought, well, again, I didn't know this at the time. So I went ahead and built this guitar it probably took me 18 months, a couple of years probably. And by the time it got to somewhere in, I think 82, I sent some photographs off to Jackie at the fan club. Excuse me a second. Sorry. And the story goes that she came back and said, Brian said, "Why have you got drawings, pictures of my guitar on your desk?" And she said, "Well, it's not your guitar. It's this guy, Julian Hemingway, who's built this guitar." I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And said, "Tell him to come down to this Capital Radio thing we're doing. Bring the guitar with you." And this is a phone call I got, and I was stunned. I'm working in an engineering factory. I get is, "You've got a phone call." I picked the phone up, and there she's telling me all this, and I'm just absolutely stunned. So I can't remember how much time elapsed between the phone call and the actual thing, but it was amazing to get that, and I think it pretty much got me the gig, to be honest, because as I said, it was just he knew who I was, he remembered, he knew that I was the guy that gave him the pickups. And he also thought, well, he's gone ahead and built the guitar. I've got to go and see this guy. Yeah. It was brilliant. So it was something I had to sort of make sure I got right. So I sort of practiced a few party pieces because, as I said, I'm not much of a player. I can get away with quite a few bits of Queen stuff, but I've never played it in a band. In fact, I doubt if I could actually play an entire Queen song from beginning to end. I've never got that far. I tend to sort of, it's my testing regime for a guitar is to play certain licks that I learnt years ago, and just set it so I know if they sound right and the guitar's right.
I think we all have got those. We've all got those licks that we pick a guitar up, or a Red Special especially, and play the same things. And that's right. Yeah.
Yes. Get it into outer phase on the neck and middle, and squeal away. Yeah. But I duly arrived on the day with my wife. We were outside the Duke of York Theatre. This is 20th of November, 1983. It was around lunchtime, and we went in, and I got my guitar case there, and we were treated like minor celebrities. It was wonderful. I've never had anything like that before. There were runners and PR people making sure that everything was going to go smoothly. And there we are sitting in the stalls chatting with the organizer, when in walks Brian, taller than you can imagine, and he comes in with this little entourage of people, and he just sits down and says, "Oh, hello, I'm Brian, and hello, I'm Julian," and blah, 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 blah. Panic sets in a bit, and I'm trying to go, this is just an everyday event. Don't worry about it. But, I'm doing this badly, And we're introduced, and he's asked me if that's a guitar, which was still in its case. So I'm feverishly popping the catches open, and he hands him the guitar, and he sits there and he plays around. And he says, I could play that. And he hands it back to me. And I thought, brilliant. That's a real endorsement. Soon afterwards, he's doing the rounds with the organisers and chatting to them, making sure that everything's going to go fine. And then he returns and explains to me and this guy called Stuart Esworthy, who I believe is still on the forum occasionally. He was another guitarist fan who'd been invited so that we were going to be students to his master class. And he then said, right, we're going to sit down and we're going to learn this. We're going to do a 3-part harmony piece. And it's called the Pavan. It's a Tudor piece of music, which I'd never heard before. And we had to quickly learn our respective parts, I tell you what, I've never concentrated so hard. It was, I've been in local bands and we sat around a record player or a tape recorder and you sort of gradually work your way up to getting something. I had to be absolutely on it straight away. So I was bricking it a bit, to say the least. I was also explained that because I got this guitar, that I'd get a little spot to show my guitar off and play something solo while Brian looked on. Well, we were all then allocated a Vox AC30 on stage, and he just said, and we were also handed this strange bare metal box, and with 2 jack sockets in it. And I asked what it was for, and I was just told, you'll need that to go into the Vox. So I had no idea what it really was, and I dutifully plugged it in. And all of a sudden, there was this huge sound going on, volume like I'd never heard from an AC30. I used to play at home mostly using a little Electro-Harmonix muff fuzz box, which was a little thing about the size of a matchbox. And it was really basic, but it did actually give quite a good, warm, smooth sort of 74 era sort of sound through a Vox AC30. And I could control it. Of course, you couldn't turn it down on the volume control. You didn't really clean up, but I hardly ever bothered to touch my volume control. Like Brian's a compulsive fiddler, I'd turn the thing full up and then whack away until I got told off more than anything else. But that's how I realised how he got his sound, because I got no idea up to then what Brian did, other than this sort of trisonic equipped guitar. I had no idea. Oh, and the other thing as well, I got no idea about series wiring. It was all in parallel on mine, like a Strat. So if you ever listen to the Capital Radio recording, you can hear mine, but it does sound a bit thinner than it should, because that's, even with all the boost and the Vox AC30s, it isn't fully going. It's not breathing properly. So it was a bit of a shame that I didn't realise that at the time, but it would have been a better thing to record. But we got to that point, and I thought, okay, this is going to be fantastic. And there was a bit of a lull in the proceedings then, and there were just me and Brian on the stage. I was trying to be as normal with him as possible, because he's such an absolute gentleman about everything, and nothing's too much trouble. And they always say you shouldn't meet your heroes. Well, absolutely, I wanted to, and I did. And I'm really glad I did, because it was just like getting on with like an old mate, really. It was fantastic. And he was fiddling around with something on the amp or an echo box or something like that. And he got the guitar on a stand, his guitar. So I thought, I've got to go and have a look at this now. I got the chance. So I walked over and I looked at it, and I was trying to sort of like bend down and not be too obvious about what I was doing. And he looked at me and he said, pick it up, put it on. He says, try it, play it through the amp. And I go, like this. And I put it on and I just stared at it. I played a couple of A chords and a few wiggly notes, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And all I remember about it was the cracked, crazed lacquer, which was already like that even in '83. And I just stared at it, and I was just in amaze. I wish I could have looked at it more objectively, but it was just, I glazed over, basically. It was fantastic. It was like somebody handed me the Holy Grail.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, it was just, I was just overwhelmed by having it there. So
It's one of those things as well, Julian. I think that we all think, oh, if we had it in our hands, we'd spend all that time looking at some of the details that we want to know. But I just imagine that I would be like, I've got the red special in my hands, and then give it back and be like, oh, I didn't look at all the things that I thought I'd look for.
No. Well, as you say, because a lot of it was going to be new to me, they didn't jump out, because my guitar was okay, but it wasn't absolutely, it was certainly not like to the level that we do it today. But, you know, there was enough detail on it for me to think, well, I've made a pretty reasonable copy. But then the first thing I realized when I picked it up and looked at it, I thought, mine's too big. I really need to do something about this. So I said to him, I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound, like the old shop window job with the Rickenbacker. I said, I just happen to have this piece of paper on me and a pencil. I said, would you mind if I drew around it on the stage? So he says, yeah, be my guest. So there's me laying Brian's guitar on a piece of lining paper on the stage, and I'm drawing around it. And I've still got that bit of paper today, and that's what I always use for my shapes. So, you know, I know it's as right as I'm ever going to get it, sanding not included, you know. But that's how I got my template early on. The show went as well as I could have expected. It was very nerve-wracking, but totally uplifting. I got to do my party piece on stage with Brian. I was introduced and asked to play something, and they said, what are you going to play, Julian? And I said, oh, I'm going to have a go at the Brighton Rock solo, because there was this audible gasp from the audience. They thought, what is this madman going to do? So then he plugged me in. He took when he heard that, he pulled my plug out of my AC30 that I was allocated, and he plugged it into his, and he got the bank of 3 and the 2 echo boxes. So, of course, I went off and I played it, and I think I did a reasonable job. I played pretty much note for note from the record, and what scared me was halfway through, you know, the A chord stabs where it goes, and he was doing it himself. And I nervously looked, and he really put me off slightly. And I was absolutely in a zone on my own. And then I heard these blasting chords coming out at the same time, and I went, oh. And I think he saw me and realised that I was not to be messed with at this time. I needed to concentrate. So, but it was so funny. And shame it never got recorded. It got recorded, but it wasn't. It was edited out at the end. Yeah. So we were on stage probably for 2 hours, and the tape's an hour. So you can sort of see where there's a lot of stuff cut out of it. But I'd like to think it was because I wasn't too bad. But so that was my little claim to fame.
What was that like though? Because that's quite, you know, an iconic piece, especially if you know Queen as well as most of us do. To actually play that live in front of an audience to the person that wrote it. I mean, did that go through your mind? How would he take it?
Of course, it went through my mind. I wanted to do it because I wanted to show certainly Brian and everybody else that this wasn't doing this for fun. It wasn't taken lightly. I really wanted to make a good job of it. And as I said, I think I'd done it at home with an old copycat. Wem copycat. I'd modified it, and I used to do the album version with the single repeat on the album. It is only a single repeat. Subsequently, on stage, every time he does it with the old stereo mix going on, because I was only used to that. And of course, when he starts banging away these chords in the background, it kind of threw me as well, because I felt I'm sort of chasing the echoes a bit, because I was not used to having like another one was coming as well after the second repeat. So it was a bit scary, but I just wanted it to, because that was my party piece. As I say, it was something that of all the bits I learned. So I thought, well, that's so Brian. That is the epitome of what Brian's playing at the time was all about. And I thought, well, everybody should know what it is. And I did it to the best of my ability, which I hope was reasonable. But as I say, nobody will ever know now. That's between me, Capital Radio, and Brian. So. But we went off for a drink afterwards, and I got a couple of photos of Brian, the famous one with Brian with his arm around me with a glass of beer in the hand.
Yeah.
And the most fun thing was that I was introduced to Chrissy and then Mr. Harold May.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he was just like you see him. He'd got his suit and his glasses, and he was stood there with his tie on, and absolutely, genuinely interested. And he wanted to look at my guitar, and he asked me all sorts of questions about it. And it was, you know, how I'd made it, and where did you get this from, that from? And there's a couple of things that are different. And I said, well, my bridge was just a solid brass block but he'd got all the slots in it, but it was all one piece, and it had been chromed. So it looked right, and it looked like the pictures did from these blurred photos. But he said, yeah, that's a good way of getting around it. He says, Brian's is a bit more adjustable. And he says, how does your tremolo work? I said, well, it does like this. You know, he says, take the cover off. So anybody got a screwdriver? No. So a screwdriver was immediately found, and there's me unscrewing the back plate off the tremolo, and he's going inside it. He's, oh yeah, I see, yeah. Oh, you've got the two springs like we've got. Yeah, I said, well, it is a copy of yours. I said, but I didn't know the exact detail, but I said, it does work well. Oh, that's very good, very good. And you know, so basically, it was fantastic to. His dad was genuinely interested, as Brian was genuinely interested in what we were doing as well. So it was a fantastic day, and I never forgot it, never will forget it. Just to finish the story off, I wrote to Brian a little bit later and said, where can I buy one of these treble boosters that we had? Because that's absolutely amazing. It's going to like complete the picture for me. And in the post, one arrives. And my baby, there it is. That's my piece of kit. And there's a little story to that as well, because when I tried it, and I had an AC30 at the time, I had one of the original 60s normal channel only, not the bright type. And I plugged it in. I went down to a local pub, set up in a skittle hall on my own, and I plugged this thing in. Well, it was shaking glasses on the bar. The guy told me, he came in, he says, you can't do that. He said, the glasses are working the way off the bar. Okay. So I thought, and the biggest problem was this massive wall of hiss. It had got the sound and the drive and the sustain. It was fantastic, but it hissed like a snowstorm. It was absolutely terrible. And I thought, well, how am I going to use it? And especially as I wasn't doing much band-wise then, I thought, I'm just going to have to use it as a souvenir. So basically, that then said to me, after all of this, the thing I've got to do now is build a proper Red Special. That's an absolute must. Bearing in mind Brian's meeting and me seeing the guitar still didn't answer everything. So I took another year or two or three, something like that, before I actually managed to create the first one based on my drawing. And again, the internal details, we've got it all now. These fantastic x-rays and the Red Special book, sadly only selling for about £1 or 50p now or something, what it is. But I paid full price for both of mine. Anyway.
So did I. Simon, if you're listening.
Yeah. It's a shame, but it's a great book. And as you say, we've got it all there now.
Very lucky.
Yeah, we were. But as I say, I had nothing like that. And all I got was this sketch that Brian had done for me, which showed basic shapes either side of this block. So I thought, well, okay, that's the way mine's going to be. And in actual fact, my first attempts were pretty close. They weren't the exact perfect shape that they are in the x-rays, but they're both there, and they're both, so I got plenty of air inside the guitar. So I built my first one, and I was really pleased with it. As soon as I plugged it in, I knew that it had got all the elements that I wanted. I got the fat neck and all the rest of it. So I was really pleased with that. So about another year or so later, I realized I got a bit bored, and I thought, you know what, I've got so many parts from this first prototype proper guitar that I actually ended up making another one because I'd got a sort of a neck that I'd gone so far with, and then thought, oh, I'll try this bit of wood. And so eventually I put it all together. And in fact, I even bought some real DiMarzios, and I pinched the pickups off my first guitar, and they went on the guitar. They've been wired in series. And then the DiMarzios, because that 84 model, and obviously, by the time you can tell, I was able to buy a set of 3 of those, but I didn't just leave them as they were. I managed to come across some more cases, took the bits and pieces out of them and put the DiMarzio internals inside the Trisonic cases. So it looked good. And to my ears, it didn't sound that different from my set on the other guitars. So I had 2 very nice, very close guitars. Well, I'm going to skip a bit here because with all things being Queen, for me, Queen was Queen from 73 to 77. And then we started to do stuff that I wasn't listening to every album track. I was listening to the ones that I liked the best, but I started to wander off. And I said, sacrilege or not, but I started to get into people like Gary Moore and Michael Schenker, and it sort of took me away from the Brian May guitar thing for quite a while. And bearing in mind, I thought I'd kind of done it all now, and let's just sort of park that and move on. Well, I even got to the point where I got these 2 guitars, and I thought, you know what, I only really need one, so I'll put the other one up for sale. I advertised it in a guitar magazine, and I only had one man who came to inquire about it, and that one man was a certain Mr. Mark Reynolds. And he turned up at my house and said, "Oh, I gather you've got a Brian May guitar for sale. Could I have a look at it?" Looks it over and plays it, and then he says, "Well, actually, I'm trying to build one myself." And he said, "I just wondered how you'd done some of your things." He said, "You don't mind?" I says, "No." And as I say, I'd kind of wandered off into another musical realm. I was playing other guitars. And he says to me, "Look, I've got this one on the go at the moment." And he said, "Can you give me a couple of pointers on certain things?" So I did, and from that we became firm friends, and we're still in regular contact. Every time something new crops up, or something crops up on the forum, we have a private chat about it, or and he says, "Oh, I found a bit of information about so and so. Do you want to know this?" And it's been brilliant. Mark has been my sort of Brian May Red Special DK amp pedals twin ever since that time, and we've sort of worked together on a number of projects. He's a great electrician, so he knows his way around capacitors and stuff more than I do. But and he only lives 10 miles, or he did. He's moved a little way further away, but he only lived 10 miles away. And he told me the story. He says, the only reason I think he told you on the latest blog that you did with him, and he said he was the only person because they'd got my address or phone number wrong or something. Yeah. And he managed to track me down because he's local. I think he tracked me down through a music shop or something. And nobody else came to. I often wonder why nobody was interested in my fabulous Brian May guitar. It's only because nobody else could actually contact me. So he was kind of lucky there. But I'd sort of given up on the project, and he saved me basically because I'd just gone away from it all, and I got so intrigued by what he was doing. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, I've got this and I've got that, and I'm going to try and talk to so-and-so." And I was just hooked again. I just completely went straight back in where I'd left off, and it was fantastic. So with Mark's help, I improved both my knowledge and it's pretty good with electrics, as I said. And so we looked at some pedals and even an early DK amp we worked on similarly at the time. Takes me back to the treble booster. Now, I said I'd shelved it and put it on one side as though it was just a souvenir. And that got me thinking. And I drew the circuit up, which unfortunately sort of escaped into the wild and now has become sort of a bit of a minor celebrity in itself. But the BC 182L Pete Cornish equipped unit, he said, well, basically, there's only about 11 components on it or whatever. So what I did one day, I just literally bought a load of modern components and I laid them out and I said, right, unsolder component 1, take it out, put a new one in, because I'm not great at sticking meters in and trying to figure out. So I literally unsoldered each unit, put a new one in, and I did that. And about 4 or 5 components later, all of a sudden, the thing absolutely just took off. The noise had gone, the boost was there, nothing had changed, but the noise, this horrible snowstorm had gone. It still hisses like most treble boosters do, but the massive overload that you made it unusable had gone. So that sorted me out. And as I say, it's still my go-to pedal. I've got various other ones, but I still like to plug that one in because it just does the job for me. It's the one I got most used to hearing. But that's the story behind that one. Do you want to ask me anything? I'm sorry, I keep going on, and you've not.
No, not at all. It's really interesting. It's a lot to take in, to sort of think about. I mean, there's so many arguably fortuitous moments in the story throughout the years of timing and you finding various things and being in the right place at the right time. At the time, I'm guessing it just felt like it was natural, but looking back, do you feel like it could have been completely different if you hadn't followed certain things?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm just working out, it's pretty much 50 years that I've been doing this. So I can compress time into a few pages of notes. But at the time, as you said, there were other things came along. I had a rotten job, or so I thought anyway, which got in the way of things. My band aspirations never really came to anything. I mean, I actually played in Germany for a few months with a band there, and so that's another story. It was like Escape from Colvix at the end. We had to escape rather quickly. But anyway, that's that sort of that things got in the way. And if I can say anything about what I've done, is that I pushed the boundaries of what I could do with the information I had at the time, and I made every effort to try and get the best out of what I had, and it sort of basically led to one guitar after the other. Now, I'm never quite happy with there was always something in me whenever I built a guitar that I said, there's got to be possibly something else I don't know about. So that's why I always stuck with it. I always wanted to know whether it was Mark when he had the guitar in his sort of possession sort of thing, when he was working with Greg Fryer. He sort of gave me a couple of heads up on some of the things that they'd done together, and just gradually built until we got the sort of the guitar we see today. And I was never happy with it. I was happy at the time, but then I played it for a bit and thought, well, perhaps there's something else I could do, or something else I'm missing. But in actual fact, my first guitars, I think they played and sounded just as good as the ones I made a year or so ago, because essentially we can put all the hank nuts and bits of araldite in holes, and we can put different machine heads on. But at the end of the day, if you get the neck right, the body right, and you've got the trisonic pickups, and they're in the right ballpark, you've got a pretty good idea you're going to get a Brian May guitar. What you lack is Brian's brain and his fingers. And that's that we have to give that to him, don't we?
Definitely.
I mean, that's for the collection. Sorry.
I was going to say, what's interesting though, Julian, is that you grew up at a time and you decided you wanted to make guitars yourself. Was that because you, similarly to Brian, weren't in a position financially to buy what was available, or you just didn't like what was available and didn't want to buy it? I
think, put it this way, when I bought the Les Paul copy, the bolt-on neck thing, it was what I could afford. The possibility of having a real Gibson was absolute zero. I'd got a young family, and my job wasn't particularly thrilling or paying well. So it was always a kind of a mentality, and I've got that today. If something breaks in the house or in the car, I'm more than likely going to go and have a try and fix it myself than I would get a man in. And that's just my basic, that's my basic Meccano boy upbringing from the 50s, because that's what I think is lacking in a lot of people today. I'm not going to decry them too much, but I think that a lot of people have forgotten that things are made and people use their hands and tools to make them. And I've always been of that kind. I've always liked to, use my hands and my brain. I get far more out of building a guitar from scratch than I do from buying one. I'm not saying I've bought a few guitars over the years. My latest one being the Burns 12-string. There's a little bit of a nod to Long Away and stuff. And I've always fancied one. They came up very cheaply just before Christmas. And so I bought myself one of those. I wouldn't want to try and make one because there's a lot of work for the amount of songs I'm likely to play on it. But, so that's fine. I'll allow myself the odd pleasure of buying one, but it soon passes, and as you say, and then on to something different. So yeah, it's more the case that I enjoy the building, and as soon as I finished a guitar, I'm looking around. Okay, what else can I do now? Yeah. Because once that build is done, I don't spend hours and hours playing it. I play it until I'm completely happy that there's no choking on the frets, the pickups are set exactly where I want them to be. And once I've done all that, I go, right, okay, that's that one done. Let's move on. Next one. Yeah, I mean, the progression of guitars ever since those late 80s models that I built, which I introduced Mark to, and then he nearly bought one, but he didn't, was the, well, I don't blame him, he was making his own. So, but they've just improved. And at the moment, I've got my original 82 with the oversized body. I've got something from 85 that's now got Eclipse pickups in, which is a nod to his first guitar. My 87, it was refurbished, completely struck down, and it was sort of like lots of modifications to make it more like modern spec. I built the John Birch. I built a Guild 84 replica. I built the green F-hole, which was the guitar that never was. That was the one I mentioned in the plans, which I had all the time. It doesn't get much use because it doesn't have a lot of Brian May sounds in it, unfortunately, because we assumed it had two pickups on because he only showed two on-off switches. So I can, even though I think he only shows one or none on the actual plan, I had to assume it was two. But I quite often think, shall I put a third pickup in it? And I thought, no, that's just a piece of history. I'll leave that as it is. I've got a modern full spec model with locking tuners, etc., etc. I've got my 75 spec model, which is the one. Just, I think it's the first one you can see straight in front of you. That red one there. Dot. That's pretty much like your latest Guyton, I believe, in many parts. And I've sold. Oh, I've got a Burns BM, believe it or not. I bought that in 2001. It was a number 200 and something. It was one of the quite early ones. And that's got the usual white switches, pearl tuners, a tremolo tip, etc., to make it. But again, it stays in its case. Again, it's a bit of history. It plays okay, but I still prefer my own for most of them. But I mean, that's pretty much where I am, and it's literally only because year on year something else will come out, and somebody will say, "Oh, did you know that this is or that is?" Or somebody says, "Are there 3 penny washers there rather than 2?" And oh God, have I missed something else? One of my guitars, I missed out the 2 screws that go through the little oak plate in the centre, the top one. I forgot to put the 2 screws, the wood screws in. Never forgive myself, but I've got to build a whole new guitar now because I've missed 2 screws,
What point do you think you've got a problem?
Yeah. You mean an obsession? Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think I've got to give a nod to Matt Netherwood here, our favourite Yorkshireman. because he's done some absolutely amazing detailed work. He goes to the nth degree, which brings me on to a sort of a final point, really, and that is that it's great to see so many young guys that probably never saw Queen live buying and building guitars and playing the music, and it's fantastic to see. I haven't got a problem with CNC manufacturing, but I could never do it, because to me it's hand tools, no templates. I freehand route everything, and no two of my guitars are ever identical. You can't take parts off one and put them on another, because there's going to be fractions of each guitar is built up from the ground, and it's, you know what I mean. It's not something I can duplicate or want to. I've never made a guitar for anybody else, and I've never made one on a commission. So if I have sold them, they've just been, because they're sort of surplus to requirements, or they're not different enough from what I've already got. So I end up with a couple of duplicates, and by all accounts, the people who've had the couple of guitars that I have sold, they've been very pleased with them. So I'm not sure whether I will ever build another Brian May guitar. I'm at the moment, I'm actually working on I've just finished a Burns replica, not a replica, a real thing that I've had to do an awful lot of work on, which I'm pleased, because it was the guitar that was in the Rice Krispies advert in 1964, and that is my. It is actually a 1962 model. But if you saw what it looked like before I did this to it, you would laugh, because it was a complete and utter wreck. But so it's really, any guitar gives me a lot of pleasure if it has some meaning to me. I'm literally starting at the moment making a John Lennon Rickenbacker 325 replica. Not so much that I was a massive Beatles fan, but I always think that the picture of him standing there with this black guitar with a gold scratch plate, right up here, playing away, that's my childhood memory, my very earliest memories of music. So I'm sort of going to do one of those. But as far as the Brian May stuff concerned, I don't know whether I'll make another one. Having said that, what am I going to do with this? I've got no idea what I'm going to do with this. This is just laying around doing nothing. So do I beat myself around the head with it and make a replica of, like a Matt Netherwood, every scratch on it? Or does it get used for some other purpose? I don't know. That's for the future.
I'm sure it needs some blockboard and oak around it, with some mahogany veneer, an element of Hank rivet nuts and araldite, and
it's got a few in here and there, as you can see already. Yes, but yes, it's a spare, but it's not going anywhere. It might end up being attached to a guitar at some point. And so the only one I haven't made is actually a sort of a distressed replica. Yeah, and it breaks my heart to do all that work and then knock it about. But that's just me again. So
no, it's really interesting, Julian. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, obviously you started this journey back a long time ago in the 70s when Queen started to come. Well, when Queen came out, at some point the internet happens, and then you obviously meet Mark around. I forget when you said
it's probably, I should imagine, around about it was sometime in the 90s, I think, before I met Mark. Yeah.
And then the internet starts
early 90s.
to take off. Internet starts to take off a few years later. Do you then join up on the forums with Mark, or do you? No, I didn't actually. I think Mark seemed to be more savvy with the internet than I was, and I had dial-up for a start. I didn't, I wasn't too worried about it. But I was into computers. I actually sort of built computers in the mid to late 90s. I was always going around car boot sales and buying a board here and a hard drive there and bits of memory and stuff. And I quite enjoyed doing all that. But
the internet just evolved really as something I didn't quite get what the internet was for a start, and then you realise that you can't do without it nowadays. But I didn't personally sign into any of the forums at all. It was only really, I don't know how long I've been on this the Red Special forum, but even that's quite relatively recent in actual fact. And as you say, there was nothing. It wasn't. It suddenly opened up everything. You can put in Brian May Red Special guitar, and you've got acres of pictures and all sorts of stuff on it now. But it was forum wise. No, I think Mark had actually got into forums when they were off Facebook. I think I forgot which ones they were, but I always found it difficult for some reason. I never managed to sign into them properly. I'd either the password wouldn't work or something, and I'd try to get back in again, and then they say, "Oh no, your password doesn't work." And so I didn't pursue them. But so really, no, I've not spent a lot of time on forums at all. So I always look at the forum every day. I tend to look in and then I'll keep quiet sometimes because I probably don't possibly agree, or I don't have anything to say more than likely on a certain subject. When I see a subject that I do think I know something about, then I'll put my full penny in, and hopefully it's of use to somebody.
Definitely. I think from memory, I joined the forum, the old Brian May World Forum in the early 2000s, and Mark would often reference yourself. And
right, okay.
I think the first time I ever met you, because I knew you weren't on the forum, was at Matt Wickham's Red Special meetup in I can't remember.
Well, it was opposite Mark's house. It was literally, it was a church hall. So Mark has a church more or less opposite his house, and it's like the next kind of bit of road down, and that was really ideal for me because it was just literally a walk across the road, meet up with Mark or whatever, and just park up and go straight across. So so they were the first ones I went to.
Were you amazed at, I mean, back then there was maybe 300 or 400, well, no, not probably even that, 200 or 300 people on the forum. The meetups weren't as well attended. Were you surprised how many other people there were on a similar journey to you at that point?
I was surprised there weren't more. I think I asked myself the question once a few years back, just how many people have actually built the guitar. A lot of people are interested, and a lot of people have bought guilds along the way and things, but I still wondered how many people were actually building certainly one-offs. I mean, if you're a private builder and you're producing them even in low quantities, that's a different story altogether. Again, each to their own. But as far as I was concerned, my guitar journey, if you like, has always been to improve on the last one, or I've missed something completely, and I feel more comfortable if I had those particular elements on it, even though I know that 90% of the stuff is not going to make a huge difference to the sound. It's just that you feel better about it, don't you? As it's got all the bits on it. Obviously, those who've bought the latest, like yourself, the latest guide, and obviously appreciate that sentiment as well. Definitely. Because you need to know that everything's on there.
Definitely, and it makes no difference whatsoever to how it plays compared to how it feels. But I think when you pick it up, knowing that all of the choices and decisions and maybe happy accidents and even mistakes that if you look hard enough, you'll see Brian and Harold made some mistakes and changes. When you know they're all in there, it's that final piece of the puzzle isn't, it's taken. I can't blame the guitar for not sounding like Brian May anymore. It's definitely me.
No, you know, there's everything, even though it may not be making a difference. The fact that it's there, it's an extra bit of metal, it's an extra bit of wood, it's an extra bit of hole in the guitar. You don't know whether that is making a difference or not. But as you say, it makes you feel better that the only bit missing is Brian's brain and his fingers, as you said.
Yeah.
So, well, I said to myself years and years ago, when I first made the first couple of proper ones back in the mid-late 80s, my goal, I said this to myself, was that I'm going to have to make a guitar that Brian could pick up and feel totally comfortable with and not just be polite. and that was my goal. That was my aim at the time. So, and it's always been that, I suppose. I mean, I've been in contact with him since. I have had little. I don't wear out my welcome. I pick and choose, but I have a way of contacting him. And when I've had a bit of a query, I've been able to get through. And he's still a great bloke, still very, very helpful. But I really don't push it. You know what I mean? I know he's a busy man, and I'm who I am, and I accept that. So.
No, it's a really interesting story. I hadn't realised you'd met Harold as well. I mean, to have met the other half of the creator of the Red Special.
Yeah.
Must have been.
I mean, I think
special.
I was aware of Harold's part in it. Obviously, but to not only meet him, but also to find that, you see, because sometimes maybe people might think that Brian tells the story quite well about. They didn't get on for a start when he joined the Queen, and he should have been doing studying, and they didn't get it, and all that sort of thing. But when I met him, it was like father and son, absolutely, totally committed, totally interested. There was nothing. They were completely genuine about it, and that's what I liked. Brian is the most genuine person I think I've ever met, and his dad was. He wasn't just doing it for show at all. He was genuinely interested. So it was a great time to meet him.
Well, definitely.
Glad I did,
Yeah, very fortunate, especially, I guess at that point as well, I'd imagine that they hadn't come across anyone else or many people that had gone to the effort you had. So to find someone that had tried to do what you had done would have been really fascinating for them as a concept.
I never thought to ask, actually. I don't know. I think there's a German guy on the forum. I think he might have got to see Brian with a guitar around about the same time. I can't remember, but I know there are very few. Like going back to what you said earlier about the number of people. I think it's nice to see now, even though there's a lot of CNC creations out there, and as you say, each their own. If you find it easier to build a guitar with CNC equipment, at the end of the day the result's going to be the same. It just means there's less mistakes, because if you saw some of the mistakes I make, as I say, that I'm the filler king, that as you say, most of the time they're for me, so I don't mind. I'll get round things.
My own build that I have as well, I built with Doug Short, which we covered off in Doug's episode, and there's some filler in that too, Julian. Don't you worry.
Yeah. Well, you try your best, and at the end of the day, as you say, if you're not completely in charge of the tools like I am usually, to say I still only own and it's even recently bought is a pillar drill. To get holes a bit squarer than I used to do by hand. Literally never used a power drill, always used a hand drill. I've got a bandsaw, which is not really big enough, man enough for the job, but it just about manages. I've got a little sanding disc, but everything else is hand tools, chisels, fret saws, hacksaws, and it's just it takes a long time. But I suppose taking a long time means that you don't take too much off in one go. So you always sort of go, one more slit and that'll be gone, But as I say, you feel that when you're making the whole guitar right through to the end, you feel that any minute now you could make a horrendous mistake, drill a hole in the wrong place, or something won't line up.
No,
but it's that's half the fun. Half the fun.
Definitely is. And you've obviously, or not obviously, but you came to my meetup last year, and you came to one previously when we had all the DC tests.
Yes.
Thank you for coming, because it's great to put faces to names, and I think for some of the youngsters and some of us on the forum that knew of you since you joined the Facebook forum, and what you have done and tried, where you built your own air coils for Prosonic pickups, you've made the Eclipse pickups, you really are. A lot of the information that we had before the book came out stemmed from things you tried and done and worked on with Mark Reynolds. So thank you very much for doing all of that, because I think you originally set the like the building blocks and foundations for this whole thing. And when those of us looked to see if there were other people interested in it and happened across it, it's a bit of comfort to know that there were some other fools that had already tried it.
Oh yeah. Well,
been successful. So you're in good company.
I mean, I did actually. Well, when I say I drew it, my young lad drew a complete plan and filled a lot of the details in. He didn't design it, but I designed it. But I said, "Would you fancy drawing a plan?" And I told him what to do, and I gave him the basic shapes and everything. And I remember he helped me a lot, and that plan actually became something that I ended up sending out to several people. And I think going back to the late 80s, 90s, again, it was word got around that I had these plans, and I think somebody mentioned not too long ago, they said that they'd come across this plan. And if you look at that plan, even though it was drawn during the 80s, it's still workable. There's one or two little errors and one or two changes, like the tremolo system and things like that, where I've shown how I did it. But I mean, as I say, I've always been quite happy to share the information out, because it's like once I've got it and I've worked really hard to get it, I don't just sit there and say, I'm having it, nobody else is going to have it. I actually think, right, well, let's let everybody else have a go at it now and see what they make of it, you know.
Well, and if you look at the forum now and compared to where we were even 20 years ago when I joined, I mean, you're going back a few years before then, but the amount of information that we've got now, and people building parts and people replicating.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Matt Netherwood's now replicating the TCC metal mic capacitors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I've done the same. I've got a box of dead ones, and I've put modern capacitors inside them and put the little caps back on. And I've been there, seen it, done it. You know, that's it's as you say, it's fantastic that the internet has given people such a choice of information and a wealth of information that I never had. And you know, I suppose I sort of pride myself on the fact that I did what I did without all of that. But on the other hand, I wouldn't have known if I hadn't seen the X-ray plans. I wouldn't have known the exact details of the internals and where all the screws were exactly and all that sort of thing. So it's you know, I've had to take from other people as well, because in my quest to build the ultimate guitar, which I think that one is. I don't think I'm going to improve on that one, but you know, I've only got there because of what's come out after I sort of moved on as well. You know, so it's great that it's all out there now, and the book, obviously, and you know, Simon Bradley's you know, efforts there have opened it up to an awful lot of people to, you know, to be able to do the same thing now. Long may we continue, I think.
Definitely, and I think what's great is we've also got this wonderful community of people with a lot of mutual respect for those people that have put themselves out and done things and built things, and are now sharing their stories where they've met Brian, played the Red Special, had Brian play the guitar. It's a fantastic. It's like the golden age of the Red Special community, I would say. We seem to be in at the moment.
Yeah, it's a shame that on the other hand, I'm saying it's a shame, but I think if Brian turned up to a meet, I would wonder quite what he'd make of us.
Well, he's aware of what we do, Julian, and he's very grateful to us for. I think Luke Holwerder posted up after the US meetup that he'd shared some contact with Brian because they raised some money for Save Me, which we did in our meetup, but I didn't do the press side of it, so I should do that this year. But Brian sent Luke a lovely message to say thank you for the efforts that we're going to in keeping the I guess the story of the Red Special and Brian and Harold. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Brian, as you say, I think I'd be very grateful for things like the charity aspect of it. But and I know that through a certain chappie who's been to one of the meets, so we also know he can be a little bit, you know, iffy about the way some people have produced some guitars. But I think in the main, if you can prove to Brian that you're an absolute fan and you really appreciate what he was able to create from scratch it's a fantastic thing. Him and his dad built this guitar that's now become an icon, and there's nothing else like it. Nothing else sounds like it. And I think that's where people like me and other people who've done the similar thing will score quite highly, because it's a nod to him. You're not going out there to say, right, well, how many of these can I sell if I get them right, and that sort of thing. That's a different ball game altogether. But I think anybody who's built the guitar, or several, but it's all aimed at one thing, and absolutely trying to get the ultimate. It's the ultimate compliment to Brian, I think. Really, I hope he takes it that way anyway. So yeah,
I think he definitely does, and I think it would be it's a shame that Harold's no longer with us, because I think now would be a fantastic time for them both to attend and see how much love and attention and goodwill and effort goes into some people's builds to replicate everything. It's definitely a good time to be alive in Red Special world.
And as you said, the forum itself, you very rarely get a crossword. It's a very good humoured. We're all there for the same reason. So you might not agree with everybody's statements, but as you said, it's a free country. We can all make our opinions known.
Definitely.
As long as we're not rude. We not get rude to anybody. So yeah.
No, I don't know of any other place that is like the forum for any other guitar player or guitar builder or any other fans of a thing or of a theme of things, where everyone gets on pretty much 90% of the time, but we all disagree every now and again. It's such a wonderful testament to Brian and the guitar as well, I think.
Absolutely. Well, I think I might have run out of steam about now. I think actually my dinner's not too far away, but then it's
lunchtime.
Yeah.
Well, Julian, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Look at that.
It is galore. Yeah.
And thank you for what's been amazing is to hear your story from you and capture that, but also to see some of those clippings and books that started it off for you.
So you did. That's how it started. Yeah. I mean, it's a very, very meager beginnings, but it all built from there. Yeah. And it's been great talking to you about it. It's nice to offload, and tell my story, Yeah.
But thank you so much for spending time with me this morning. It's been great chatting to you, and I hope to see you at the next Red Special meetup this year in October.
Yeah, I don't see why not. It'd be great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Julian.
And what a fantastic episode that was, Julian. I wonder what you're going to be doing with that spare neck you've got there. If you've not got anything to do with it, you can always send it my way, and I'm sure I could find a use for it. But thank you once again for agreeing to be the guest after Brian May, for having so much information and prepared so many bits and pieces to show us in the episode. It was truly wonderful talking to you, and it's been great to get to know you over the years at the Red Special Guitar Meetup. And literally, without you, maybe none of this would have happened. If you hadn't built that first guitar and tried to sell it, and Mark Reynolds figured out how to get hold of you and then come around and start talking to you, maybe this wouldn't have grown and gone on. But I'm so pleased it has, because you're an absolutely wonderful asset to the community, and you do some fantastic work, and you're just a genuinely nice bloke. So thank you so much for your time. And if you've enjoyed this episode of today's Red Special Guitar Podcast, episode number 21, then please make sure that you hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe. It all helps us get more noticed in the big wide world of algorithms and YouTube, and helps people find the channel who may have an interest in these things. And that is fantastic, because I really feel like the story of the Red Special and what it's led us on to do, not just Brian with Queen and all of the wonderful things that he's gone on to do with Queen music, and then all of the other wonderful things that he's done, but also how it's brought all of us together as a community, and a pretty awesome community. We kind of defy most odds. We encourage young people to join. We don't look down at people if they have a different guitar or whatnot. And what a community it is that we have. It's a fantastic place to be. The Facebook forum is so welcoming, and we have these wonderful meetups where you get to meet face to face with people. It's well worth checking those out. You can check out news by following this channel, and also by checking us out on Instagram and Facebook. But people come together as humans in the digital age, where people are told that communities are slowly dying, ours is slowly growing, and we are very inclusive of all people in the Red Special community. And so please, if you're interested, then join up and make sure you check out when we're all coming together, because it truly is a most wonderful weekend. And that's whether that's in one of the 2 US meetups, the Japanese meetup, the UK meetup, or the Italian meetup. That's just some fantastic places to go and meet like-minded individuals and feel instantly a part of something. It really is a testament to Brian, and his whole way about doing things has rubbed off on all of us. But anyway, that's enough rambling from me. Keep your eyes peeled on the channel and on all of our social media for some news coming out soon. Thank you all so much for emailing. I don't yet have any updates for you on the UK meetup in 2023. When I do, you'll all be the first to know. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled. And we've got some special things coming up in the coming months and some wonderful plans for 2023. So I hope to see you all there, and thanks ever so much for staying in touch. You keep safe, and I'll catch you later.